So today, I experienced a Damascus Road experience. I suffered a heart attack and needed to go through an emergency heart procedure. I just returned home from a 2-week trip to London, Paris, and Amsterdam, something which had been on my bucket list my entire life. I wanted to celebrate Easter in Westminster Abbey, and that was done on Easter morning, and then celebrate Easter evening Mass at St. Paul's Cathedral in the heart of London. Needless to say, it was a remarkable and memorable Easter I'll never forget. Following the Easter weekend, I traveled the Channel by train to Paris, where I spent several days exploring the city of lights and love. Following my stay at the French capital, I continued my travels to Amsterdam, where I found myself celebrating one of the largest festivals in Europe, King's Day, and standing among literally millions of tulips in full bloom. It was magical. But the magic seemed to come to a screeching halt on my flight home from Europe back to Minnesota. During that flight, I developed a double embolism in both my lungs, and I was rushed to the hospital. Everything seemed to be going well. I was responding to the medications. I was responding to the therapy provided. Then at 4:30 in the morning, I was awakened by the doctor with these words: "We need to rush you into the cath lab. You're suffering a major heart attack, and it appears your right ventricle is completely blocked." What? A heart attack? No, I said to the doctor. I'm not in any pain. I told my doctor it couldn't be a heart attack. He reminded me and said, "Oh yeah, it is, trust me." They wheeled me to the cath lab, where they entered my heart through my femoral artery and placed a stent in my right ventricle, which opened the flow of blood. Miraculously, my doctor told me, because they had discovered this so quickly, there was no damage to my heart. Imagine that. It was still early morning. My former wife had heard of my procedure, and she decided to pay me a visit. She was waiting with me in the room when I returned. Everything seemed to be going right. And then it happened. Suddenly I experienced pain through my chest comparable to a spear going through my body. My heart was rejecting the stent. My body was saying no to this foreign object that was placed in my heart no more than an hour prior to that. I felt myself passing in and out of consciousness. I could hear a code being called out of the hospital speakers, words which I will never forget. Ding, 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 rapid response 4905. Ding, 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 rapid response 4905. As I heard that number being called out, I wondered who the poor soul was that was being referred to. And suddenly I realized I was 4905. That was my room number. As bright lights were turned on overhead, as hospital personnel rushed into my room, as the sheets were thrown off of my body, as the sound of hospital equipment, metal on metal, clanged throughout the room, I honestly thought to myself, so this is how you're going to die. At that point, nothing really seemed important. Not my accomplishments, the trip I had just taken, my degrees. Nothing meant anything at all. What did matter was when my former wife gently took my hand and said calmly, "Steve, I am here. You're not alone, and I'm not going to go anywhere." And with those words tenderly spoken, I found myself at great peace. If I was going to die, I was all right. I was in physical touch with someone who unconditionally has loved me for decades and was reminding me she was not going to let me go. As you're all aware, the ending turned out much differently than I thought that morning. Or did it? Someone holding on to me and not letting go, Receiving a new heart or repaired one is not just the business of surgeons, but most definitely is the business of God. We would be very wrong to think this change of heart comes overnight. But we would be equally wrong to assume change can never happen at all. It may come in fits and spurts, it may come in an aha moment, a breakthrough, but it comes. It comes. Like laying on my hospital bed, the floodlights come on and grace suddenly seeps in. The meaning of life, the wasted years of life, the poor choices of life. God answers that mess of life with one word, grace. And with a sentence, my former wife uttered, I am with you. You are not alone. I'm not going to let you go. We talk about grace as if we understand the term. The bank gives us a grace period. The seedy politician falls from grace. Musicians speak of a grace note. We describe an actress as being gracious, a dancer as graceful. We use the word for hospitals, baby girls, kings, and pre-meal prayers. We talk as if we know what grace means, especially at church. Grace graces the songs we sing and the Bible verses we read. Grace shares the church sanctuary with its cousins, forgiveness, faith, and fellowship. Preachers always try to explain it. Hymns proclaim it, seminaries teach it, but do we really understand it? Here's my hunch. We've settled for wimpy grace. It politely occupies a phrase in a hymn, fits nicely on a church sign, never causes trouble or demands a response. When asked, do you believe in grace? Who says no? But it was the Apostle Paul who clung to this grace and wanted us to understand what this grace was. To the same degree he believed in God's sovereignty, he relied on God's mercy. No one had more reason to feel the burden of guilt than Paul. He had orchestrated the deaths of thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Christians. He was an ancient version of what we call today a terrorist, taking Christians into custody and then spilling their blood in the most horrible ways, the most horrible of ways. In Acts, it says of Paul was like a wild man, going everywhere to devastate the believers, even entering private homes and dragging men and women out of their homes alike and killing them. Today, Paul would be equated to Osama bin Laden or the leaders of ISIS who kill and kill and kill. People hated Paul. They feared Paul. In addition, he was a legalist to the core. Everything he did, he believed he was righteous by his own faith beliefs. Before he knew Christ, Paul had spent a lifetime trying to save himself. His salvation depended upon his perfection and his performance. In his letter to the Philippians, he writes, if anyone had reason to hope that he could save himself, it would be I. If others could be saved by what they are, certainly I could. For I went through the Jewish initiation ceremony when I was 8 days old, having been born into a pure-blooded Jewish home that was a branch of the old original Benjamin family. So I was a real Jew, if there ever was one. What's more, Paul writes, I was a member of the Pharisees who demand the strictest of obedience and every Jewish law and custom. And sincere, yes. So much so, Paul writes, that I greatly persecuted the church. And I tried to obey every Jewish rule and regulation right down to the very last point. Paul had blood on his hands and a religious diploma on the wall. But then came the Damascus Road moment. Jesus appeared to Paul. Once Paul saw Jesus, in our gospel, we're told he went blind. He couldn't see anymore. But I think it was more than physical blindness. Suddenly meeting Jesus, he realized he couldn't see the value of his resume any longer. He couldn't see merits in his merits of worth, in his good works anymore. He realized he couldn't see reasons to boast about anything he had done in the past. And he realized he couldn't see any options except to spend the rest of his life realizing what was and wasn't important. And grace won out. Like me lying on the hospital bed, suddenly you realize what is and isn't important. Grace always wins out. Paul became the great poet of grace. But all these things that once thought were very worthwhile, he writes, now I have thrown them all away so I could put my total trust and hope in Christ alone. In exchange for self-salvation, God gave Paul righteousness where Paul could now write, now I am right with God, not because I follow the law, but because I believe in Christ. Paul basically followed the third step of AA, an important step, and gave his guilt to Jesus, period. He didn't continue to numb it. He didn't continue to hide it, deny it, offset it, or punish it. He simply surrendered and gave it all to God. As a result, Paul was able to write, I am still not all I should be, but I'm bringing all my energies to bear on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I strain to reach the end of the race and receive the prize for which God is calling me. What would the Apostle Paul say to any of you this morning who are guilt-laden? Simply this: rejoice in the Lord's mercy. Trust in God's ability to forgive. Abandon any attempt at self-salvation or justification. No more hiding behind fig leaves. Cast yourself upon the grace of Christ and Christ alone. Someday, all of us will stand before God. All of us will be present. All of us will have to give an account for our lives. Every thought, every deed, every action. Were it not for grace, I find this to be the most terrifying thought. Yet according to Scripture, according to our gospel story this morning, I will be at peace, like I was on that early morning 5 years ago. Why? Because I know with everything I am, Jesus came for me. And he's not about to let me go. He took away my sin. On the day when I appear before the judgment of God, I will point to Christ when my sins are all produced, and I will gesture toward him and say, he took them all. He took them all. Let him take yours. In one of Henry Nouwen's books, he tells the story about the lesson of trust he learned from a family of trapeze artists known as the Flying Rodleys. He visited with them for a time after watching them fly through the air with elegant poise. When now and asked one of the flyers the secret of trapeze artists, the acrobat gave this reply. The secret is that the flyer does nothing, and the catcher does everything. When I fly to Joe, who's my catcher, she said, I have simply to stretch out my arms and hands and wait for him to catch me and pull me safely over the apron. The worst thing the flyer can do is try to catch the catcher. I'm not supposed to catch Joe. It's Joe's task to catch me. If I grabbed Joe's wrists, I might break them, or he might break mine. And that would be the end of both of us. A flyer must fly, and a catcher must catch. And the flyer must trust with outstretched arms that the catcher will be there for them. In the great trapeze act we call life, God is the catcher. We are the flyers. We trust, period. End of story. We rely solely upon God's ability to catch us. And as we do, a wonderfully thing happens. We fly. And we come to understand grace. Our God has never dropped anyone. God will not drop you. God's grip is sturdy, and God's hands are open. As Paul proclaimed, I know the Lord will continue to rescue me from every trip, trap, snare, and pitfall and evil, and carry me safely to the heavenly kingdom. I can bear power to the witness of grace. I can take you back to room 4905, where I literally thought I was going to die. Nothing else mattered but hearing these words. I'm with you. I'm not going to let you go. And believing my God held me, all I could do was trust and believe and fly. That's grace. I was at peace. That morning, not only did I receive a new heart, but I was reminded of an important lesson in life. God's grace is sufficient. Can you say that with me? God's grace is sufficient. Now say it from your heart. God's grace is sufficient for me and for you. Amen.